And now I'd like to welcome to the program Michael Dembinski from the British Chamber of Commerce. Hello, thanks for joining us on TV World.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. So we just heard from our correspondent there in Brussels. There could be a power play there at the European President of the European Commission level. And of course, that's somewhat ahead of us right now. But speaking of the far right and this populist wave that we're hearing about, by some estimates taking around 30% of the seats in the European Parliament, what are we to expect of this, these far right parties? Will they be united enough to make any kind of big difference there in the European Parliament?
It's a very good question because by their very nature, parties like Identity and Democracy, they base their support on being nativist, on being against the idea of a federal Europe and being focused on domestic issues. So we saw this when the UK was still a member of the European Union, that the protest vote, time after time, we saw large groups of MEPs from UKIP, Brexit Party, sitting in the European Parliament, not at all interested in what was going on there, very poor records of attendance. And yet, despite the fact that they had zero showing in domestic parliament in the UK, they were either the second largest or third largest grouping delivered by British voters. So I would expect something similar here, a lack of joined up thinking. Having said that, entering the dynamic now is, and we've seen this for quite a while, is Russia stirring things up. Today, Politico had a very interesting list of the voting records of MEPs who refused to vote in favour of motions that were critical of Russia. And the interesting thing here is that not only were many of these MEPs from Identity and Democracy, far right party, but they were also from the far left party. So you can see the influence there of Moscow. They have picked their friendly faces that they know that they can trust and influence to get their voice heard in the European Parliament.
Well, there's a lot of concern about these, perhaps, should we say, the more extreme side or ends of the political spectrum, the rise of populism, far right, far left, I think often misinterpreted and misunderstood by the mainstream media. And there are concerns that these particular elections are actually driven by fear. But would you say that perhaps the rise of these political parties is actually a result of the failure of the more centre-driven parties, and it's something that they should be addressing rather than being more concerned about the rise of these parties, that they should address their failures?
To an extent, I would agree with you. I'd say that there are two major issues here. One of them is migration, and the other one is climate change. And it is very easy for a populist to say that no one in Brussels is doing anything to stop migration, for which read non-European migration. And on the other hand, Europe is doing too much to restrict our freedoms in the name of combating climate change. But I think another problem is the general structure of European democracy, how few people really understand how the European system works. European Commission, European Parliament, President of the European Union, who is it? Who's in charge? We often don't know in our very large constituencies who we are represented by. We don't really know enough about the groupings of the parties in Europe. We know very well our own parties domestically, but when it comes to EPP and all of these acronyms in Brussels, that's just not being communicated to the electorate across the European Union. And I think that this is something that we could really see during the Brexit debate, the Brexit referendum, that there was a mindset among many Brexiteers that Europe is somehow not democratic. And yet these are the very people who either didn't turn out to vote, or if they did turn out to vote in the European elections, they voted for extremists who turned their backs to the European national anthem and refused to show up for any of them significant votes.
Right. I remember during that, the most Googled term coming out of the UK was, what is the European Union? And, well, I think, where do you think the blame for this lies? Not just in Brexit in the UK, but what we're seeing here now in these European elections. The fact that people don't understand these groupings, just like you said, they don't know what these parties are over in Europe and what the transfer is, because here it's pretty simple, right? If someone's a member of, I don't know, let's just say the Civic Coalition, let's say they do not vote in line with their party, they are pretty easily thrown out of that party, and there's very little room for individual thought within these parties. But that doesn't necessarily translate to the European Union. In fact, someone from the Civic Coalition could be not part of the European People's Party, but part of another grouping. And even if they go against their party line, they could still stay in place. So whose responsibility is it to educate the public on what is the European Union, why it's important, and why people should vote?
That's a real problem. It's everyone's and it's no one's. So it falls between two stools. I have had the privilege of being able to travel on business on numerous occasions to Brussels to see how it all works, to actually visit the Parliament, to talk to parliamentarians, to talk to business lobbying organisations in Brussels. So I think I have a slightly better idea of what goes on in Brussels than the average person. And yes, I know that I'm completely out of my depth when I'm looking at all of these acronyms and trying to work out how the European constituencies overlay over Polish constituencies. But having said that, I can see that out here in the Polish countryside, some 25 miles south of Warsaw, that there are posters up, there are billboards, there are banners. So and people are persuaded to be voting for the party names that they understand and the faces that they recognise here in Poland. But it will be a question, what will the turnout be like? Will there be enough, especially of the young demographic who's turning out there, who understands what the issues are? Will it be protest voters? Will it be the rural protesters, the farmers? So time is running out, and I don't know what the parties are doing now to mobilise the voters, but it's probably not enough.
Well, they do say that these elections are actually driven by fear, whether it's fear of Russia, the Russian threat per se, whether it's fear of the disinformation or the hybrid warfare, whether it's actually fear of migration, security issues, the Green Deal. I think there are a lot of issues that people individually feel affected by. So it might be, ironically, a reason to be more aware of what is happening, and perhaps that might bring people to...
I think it depends where you are.
Certainly, well, a clear communication...
If you're one of the countries like Poland, like Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, or Finland that borders directly with Russia, then issues of security are right at the top of your agenda.
Right. But that also kind of whitewashes all the other really serious issues and kind of paints things with a broad brush. Well, Michael Dembinski, Director of the British Chamber of Commerce, hello. Thank you very much for joining us today. We appreciate it.
Thanks a lot. Goodbye.